Okay, so thank you all for coming. Tonight's the first night of 101, but what we're going to do is we're going to review the story, the history of Shakyamuni Buddha, so that everybody kind of understands how we think about the Buddha and so on, why the Buddha is who the Buddha is. And then next week, we'll start on the 8-week cycle, where we'll be talking about the fundamentals of Buddhism and meditation, Buddhist meditation. So we'll be using the Jewel Ornament of Liberation as a guidebook. So we have an outline. If anybody wants the outline to follow along, you can send me a message and I can mail it to you, or you can meet me down at Dharma on the weekend and I can give you a copy. But the outline is very useful to use. And we'll also be referring to the Stages of Meditation book, which is by Khenpo Samdop, who is the spiritual director of Dharma. So he wrote several books, and this particular one, the Stages of Meditation, is very, very helpful in developing a daily practice. So, Tom, good to see you. If I didn't say that before, thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments before we get started with anything? Okay. So that for you that have a Buddhism 101 prayer book, if you don't have one, I can send it to you, or you can drop by the center and pick one up. And so it just has the English translations and the English phonetics of the transliteration of the Tibetan prayers. So we use that as a means to be able to focus in and not have to have a big book around that has all the other things in there. So we'd like to begin by doing our opening prayers, which set our motivation. So as we continue along through our weeks coming up of the Buddhism 101, we'll explain these prayers, what they mean. And so you can take notes. If you've got the book, you want to take notes in the book, you can. If you want to take notes on your own paper, that's a very good idea. And so, excuse me, we'll start with the altruistic motivation on page number 1 in our 101 prayer book. All mothers, sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mothers, sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Dagla dang wa je pe dra no pa je pe ge. Tar pa dang dam she ken pe ba du jo pa je pa dam she ki so je pe. Manam ka dam yam pe sem chen tam she de wa dang den. Dog now dang drel nor du la na me pa yang dag pa zog pe shang ju bren po she to pa ja. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Peshe du sang ma ge gi bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Mashe Badulu Nagi Samge Walako. Du de ring ne song te ni ma sang ta sam gi ba du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Next prayer is the long refuge prayer. We take refuge in the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha. But we also pay respect, homage to the root lamas and the lineage lamas and the deities of the mandala. So we'll explain this later on another time. We take refuge in the kind root lama and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. We take refuge in the kind root lama and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities and the mandalas of the yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. Drensen sawa dangur parje pe pal dan lama dampa namla kapsu chio. Yedam kilgorgi la sok namla kapsu chio. Sangye chom dende namla kapsu chio. Dampe cho namla kapsu chio. Papege du namla kapsu chio. Pawo kadro cho kyung song me song yeshe gi chang dang dempa namla kapsu chio. Next prayer is taking the Bodhisattva vow. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Shangshu Ning Po Chi Ki Ba Sangye Namla Kapsu Chi Chodang Shangshu Sampai So Klang De Shin Kapsu Chi Zeta Nongi De Shegi Shangshu Tugni Ke Padang Shangshu Sampai La Pala De Dagrim Shin Ne Pata De Shin Drola Pendandu Shangshu Samni Ke Gishin De Shin Du Ni La Pala Rimpa Shindu La Pa Ji O. Short refuge prayer. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, May I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soki chonamla. Shangju Baidu Dagni Kapsuchi. Dagi Jin Soki Pe Sonamgi. Drola Penshir Sange Jupasho. And the four immeasurables, the four vast immeasurables of bodhicitta, loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, and equanimity. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam kadam yam pesem centam she dewadang dewe gudang dempajurchi. Dug now dang do now gi gudang drawar jorchi. Dug now me pe dewadang mi drawar jorchi. Nay ring jack dang ni dang draway dang namla ne pa Georgie. Okay, thank you all very much. I don't mind being interrupted while we're talking. If anybody has any questions or comments, so please, you can just raise your hand. You can raise your electronic hand in Zoom, or you can just turn on your microphone and come on in and interrupt, and that'll be fine. It's important to be able to maintain a mindful flow of consciousness. So we try and do that. But so it's important, if you have a question and you want it answered, to help you to understand the context of what we're talking about, that's fine. If it's something that can wait, and you can jot it down, you can make a note and you can ask at the end, that would be fine too. So does anybody have any questions or comments now before we get started in this story? Okay. Well then, relax. Hi, Zara. How are you this evening? Okay. So I did turn everybody's microphones off. So if you want to speak, you have to turn your microphone on. I'll just tell you that. Okay. So we talk about the three jewels. And the three jewels are the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So the Buddha lived 2,600 years ago. And the Buddha was prophesized by the culture of the Hindu at that particular time in India. Where he was born was in northern India, what's now Nepal. So it was prophesied that there was going to be this great being who was going to come, that was going to really bring many people to a point of enlightenment. Enlightenment was talked about. Enlightenment was prophesied. People sought enlightenment. And if you know anything about the Hindu tradition and any of the books in there, they talk about it often and so on. So the Buddha, when he became Buddha, and we're going to talk about how that happened, but we talk about the three jewels, the body of the Buddha, the speech of the Buddha, and the mind of the Buddha. So the Buddha that we're referring to is Shakyamuni Buddha, who is the teacher that we all think about. who lived 2,600 years ago. And so we are aspiring to be the same as Shakyamuni Buddha, that we have that within ourselves. We have Buddha nature within ourselves. So this Buddha nature is our true nature, being a human being. And Shakyamuni Buddha was a human being. And what he taught was how he enlightened, how he found enlightenment. There's many other traditions, whether it's Christian or it's Jewish or it's Hindu or it's Muslim or it's the Taoist, or they all have a tradition that they follow that in their essence is talking about this true nature, this true nature that we have within ourselves that is like our life force. So whether we call it God or we call it Christ or we call it Buddha or we call it Krishna or whatever, we're all talking about the same thing. And Buddhism is a philosophy. The Buddha taught this as a philosophy of the self, to recognize the self and to liberate oneself from any attachments and aversions that we have as being human beings. So this whole thing is an expression, is a journey of being a human being. So when he was born, or rather when he was, before he was born, his father was a king. His father had a small kingdom in northern India. And of course, he had a bride, he had a queen. And one night she had a vision, she had a dream that an elephant, a white six-tusked elephant, came to her in the dream and told her that she was going to have a child who was going to be a very special child, who is going to be a child who could lead the kingdom to places that had never been before, or he could be a child who would be a very spiritual child, who would lead beings to this prophesized enlightenment that they talked about in the Hindu tradition and so on. So she was, of course, amazed by this, and she didn't say anything about it. But very shortly thereafter, she did become conceived with a child. She became pregnant. So there was great excitement in the kingdom. This was the first child and so on. So everybody was very happy about that. And the king was thrilled that he should have a child. And he was, of course, hoping for a boy, because 2,600 years ago, they always want the firstborn to be a boy. They want many boys and so on, was the way they thought about things. So it was the custom of the people at that time for the mother, as she was about to have the baby, as she was about to give birth, she would travel to wherever her home was, where she came from, her mother and father, where they came from. So like that, the queen was traveling down to the village where she came from. And she got part way in northern India, and she got to this area called Lumbini. And in Lumbini, there was this great big lake, this big pond, this big lake, and so on. And the pains, the contraction pains, became very strong and so on. And she realized that she was about to give birth. So she was a queen, so she wasn't traveling by herself. She had a whole entourage of people. But they were all on, some kind of horseback or elephant back, or they were in a sedan chair that was being carried by porters or something like that. And there was a lot of baggage that was coming with them and so on. So they got to this place called Lumbini, and she knew that she was going to give birth. And so her attendants, the women that were with her, immediately surrounded her with these beautiful silk sheets, and so that she could have some privacy. And the custom was that women at that time would give birth standing up. and they would hold on to the branches of a tree. So there was a tree called the sal tree, S-A-L, sal tree, that was perfect for this. And many women would use this as a birthing tool. And the attendants would help the mother, to give birth in this standing position. So anyway, so she adopts this position and they surround her with the silks and sheets and so on, but she's having a terrible time giving birth and the baby's not coming and so on. So as it said, and it's 2,600 years ago, so we don't know how much of this was absolutely true. We could, how much of it might be some kind of a legend, some kind of a mythology or something like that. But nevertheless, it's said that she was cut in her side and that the infant was born from that cut. And when the infant was born, the infant immediately was able to stand up. And he took 7 steps after being born like this. And he raised his hand. And with each step that he took, flowers came up, flower petals came up with each of those 7 steps. And he raised his hand and he said something to the effect, he says, I am going to be the one who is going to bring enlightenment to all beings. I can change everyone's life. I will be the great awakened one. I will be the Buddha. So everyone, of course, was amazed that this infant just born is doing this, but this is the story. And so then he more or less becomes a normal infant, and they start to take care of him as an infant and so on. So it's not said clearly whether they proceeded in the procession down to the village where his mother came from, or they turned around and they went back to the kingdom where the king was. But nevertheless, they proceeded along to go. Before they did, though, they stayed at that lake in Lumbini and they bathed the baby in that lake, and they bathed the mother, Mahadevi is her name, Mahadevi. They bathed her in the lake and so on, so that she could be cleaned up. And so it's not clear exactly where it was, but it is said that in 7 days his mother passed away. So it's not unusual 2,600 years ago that a woman giving birth like that there was a high mortality rate. There was a high mortality rate of those being born, but there was a high mortality rate of the mothers as well. So whether it was being cut, whether it was a cesarean birth, we can think that maybe that's what it was. Maybe she got infected by bathing in the lake. Many possibilities, but the point was that she passed after 7 days. So they made their way back to the kingdom, and there was much jubilation because there was it was a baby boy, and the king was thrilled with that and so on. Of course, they were sad that the mother passed and everything, but they were rejoicing about the life of the now infant. So it was also a custom at the time, especially for a noble birth, like a prince. His father was a king. So for a prince, for the father to ask for a divination, where the wise men would come and they would come and see the baby. They would ask questions of the family and so on, and they would examine the baby for certain traits and come up with an agreement of who they think this child is. Maybe they would be doing an astrological birth chart, that kind of thing, because that was definitely part of the culture. And so there was 3 wise men, and they said the same thing. They agreed that this child was going to be a very special child, and that he was either going to be a great political kingly monarch leader who had great abilities and would, bring and grow the kingdom, or he was going to be a great spiritual master. So the king was very happy to hear that he was going to be a special being, but he was not pleased to hear that there was this potential for him to be a spiritual master, because he wanted this this legacy of his son, his firstborn, to be the king when he passed. So he did everything he could in the rest of the Buddha's life, as a young child being raised in this palace and so on, to keep him away from any religious ideas and so on, any religious thoughts and so on that might contaminate him or give him the sense that this is something he should do. And he was raised in a very political kind of an atmosphere, a very militaristic kind of an atmosphere, because the king had to be a great warrior. He had a great army of people and so on. So the prince had to be a leader among those people and so on. So he did everything he could to isolate the child so that he wouldn't see any kind of pain, any kind of suffering, any kind of illness, any kind of thoughts that might sway him to become to want to become some kind of a spiritual being or anything like that. So the years that the Buddha was being raised, his name was Siddhartha Gautama, was the name that he was given, Siddhartha Gautama. So Gautama was like the family name, and Siddhartha was his name. And there was a great book by Hermann Hesse and a film that came out that was called Siddhartha. And that was a popular name at the time. And in some places in India, it's still a popular name. So the story Siddhartha from Hermann Hesse, Siddhartha, the main character in the book, was not the Buddha, although he did in his life, as Siddhartha, in the character in the book, did meet the Buddha at some point in his life after when he became famous and so on. So I'll just point that out to you so you don't get that confused if you're familiar with the name Siddhartha. So Siddhartha was being cared for by the attendants and the sisters of his mother. That they were attendants that were there, they were part of the royal family and so on. So there was no lack of attention, no lack of motherly care for Siddhartha during the whole time he was being raised and so on. And he was a lovely child and they thought it was great and all this. So as he got to be a little bit older, 5 years old, 6 years old, whatever, and he's playing games and learning how to function as a ruler, as a prince and so on. And he's being taught how to read and to write, and he's taught the martial arts of the time, and and he's playing with the other kids that are the children of the attendants and the royal entourage that is in the palace. So this palace is this huge palace, and around this palace are these courtyards. And then around the courtyards are these high walls, and there's just these gates that allow people to pass through the walls. And the gates were always, controlled by the military people, and the gates were always kept closed, and they had to be open, for someone who wanted to come inside or leave. They had to have permission or whatever. So it was expressly stated by the king that the prince, Siddhartha, was never to leave the palace grounds. He was never to go out beyond the walls, never to go out through the gates at the expense of someone's life if they helped him or allowed him to get outside the gates and so on. So, of course, everybody was very mindful of this. And the king was also very careful not to allow Siddhartha to see anything that was distasteful, anything that was anyone suffering, anybody that got injured, anyone that got sick was taken out of the palace. And so nobody could see them. The prince couldn't see them. Anybody that was injured, anybody that died was taken away. Siddhartha never saw anybody sick. Siddhartha never saw anybody injured, never saw anybody dead, anything like that. So he was very well protected, but he was very well cared for, and he was a very good student, learning how to read and write at the time, and learning how to defend himself and to become a great soldier, a great warrior, and so on. And he was always victorious with his play friends, with the other people in the family, and so on. So he grew up, with this kind of environment, and he got to be around 12 years old. And 12 years old, 13 years old is a rite of passage for a child at that time to get married. Life expectancy was very short compared to what it is today. And so when you're 30, 40, 50 years old, you're considered an old person. So marriage at an early age like that was common, particularly among the royal class of people. So the king decided that it was time for him to find a bride. So they sent out messages to all the surrounding kingdoms in India that they were looking for a princess, a bride, for Siddhartha to consider in marriage. So they set a time when they were going to have this great festival, and all these people were going to come and bring their young girls to meet the Buddha, to meet Siddhartha. So they came, and these festivals would go on for days on end. And Siddhartha's meeting all these people, and he's not finding anybody that he really cares for. And so the king is a little bit disappointed, and people around there, they're having their festivities and so on, and they're not really paying attention to what's going on. But there's disappointment from the people who are coming, with these young girls to meet the Siddhartha and not be accepted as his bride. So finally, on the last day of what they figured was going to be this great festival, this father, who is a nobleman, who brings his young daughter, name is Yashodhara, to the festivities. And lo and behold, they meet, and right away they have a connection, and right away they are very happy that this is someone that Siddhartha could marry and have a family with, and so on like that. So now the festival was a success, and everybody was thrilled. Everybody was very happy, and so on. And at some point thereafter, they got married, and they lived in the palace along with the father, and so on. And still now, Siddhartha now is about 13 years old or so at this time. And he's still not allowed to go outside of the gates or anything. But at this point, he's really not interested, because he's just so enraptured with everything that goes on with all his attendants. Everybody's taking care of him. Why should he want to do anything other than enjoy this great life that he has? So time goes on, and he's getting more training with the military and the martial arts of the time, and he's getting stronger and stronger and more victorious with his cousins and his friends and so on like that, and so everybody's very pleased with that. And the promise is that he's going to be a great warrior. He's going to be able to go out and defend the kingdom, and maybe conquer other kingdoms and bring those lands and people into the kingdom of his father, of the Gautama family. So time is going on, and years are clicking by, and Yashodhara is not conceiving a child. And there's disappointment with that. So, but nevertheless, they keep, their spirits up, and they're very happy about things, and things are going good. So at some point later in his teen years, maybe as in his 20s now, he decides that he wants to go outside the gates. He wants to understand what else is going on beyond the gates that he's not allowed to do. So he has one of his attendants who's very close to him and very trustworthy, and he convinces his attendant to help him to escape through one of the gates in the middle of the night. And this attendant is very reluctant to want to go. He says, "Oh, Siddhartha, please don't make me do this. If the king finds out about this, he's going to cut off my head." And he's expressed this, that no one should allow this to happen. And this is a very risky thing to do. We shouldn't do this. Please don't do this. So Siddhartha says, no, he says, everything's going to be fine. We'll get back in time, that nobody will know that we're gone. But I want to go outside the gates, and I want to see what's on the other side. And I need you to go with me. You need to come with me. You are my attendant. You need to listen to me. So the attendant finally agrees, and they make a plan. And at night they get on their horses, and the gallant horses, with all these beautiful colors on them, and bejeweled leather hardware and so on like that. And they got their beautiful silken embroidered clothing that they're wearing and all this. And they're going through the gate. His attendant sees to it that the gate is open for them. And they get out, and they don't get too far out, and they realize that there's this village that is right through the gate. They come to this village, and they see these people that are like lying in the street, lying in the gutters, lying in the walkways that are very sickly looking. That some have deformities. Their bodies are twisted and so on. And Siddhartha is amazed. He said, "What is this?" And people are wheezing and coughing, and people look terrible. He's never seen anything like this. So the attendant says, well, he says, you've never seen this, because anyone that gets sick, anybody that gets injured, anyone that is born with any kind of a deformity is made to go outside the palace and not allowed to stay in the palace. And these people are sick. These people have been maimed from injury. These people are born deformed or something like that. And Siddhartha says, "Oh, well, this could never happen to me." He says, "I'm a prince." And the attendant says, "Oh, yes, this could happen to you, because they are human beings, just like we are human beings, and we can have this kind of suffering like this." Siddhartha's mind, my God, what do you mean? What are you talking about? I can't be like this. I am the prince. This can't happen to me. He says, "Let's go back into the palace." So they turn around and go right back into the palace, and they're there in time that nobody knows that they're gone and everything. But Prince Siddhartha, these thoughts, these sights are staying with him. It's just amazing. So now when he's going back and he's taking up his normal daily exercises and doing the things that he does with the martial arts, and he realizes that when he's doing the martial arts with his cousins and with the attendants, children, and so on like that, that he may be bringing pain to them. Sometimes they cry, sometimes and sometimes he never sees them again. And he's putting this together. He's saying, wow, there's a connection here. Now I see that there's suffering, and could I have caused some of that suffering? So over some time passes, some more time passes, and he gets up a little bit more courage, and he says, I want to see what else is out there. We just went very, very right through the gates. And we just saw those people. But I want to understand now what this village is like. And I want to understand, how far this village goes and so on. So he goes back to his attendant and he tells his attendant, we got to go back out. I want to go see what's going on. The attendant says, oh, please, Arthur, we got away with it one time. Please let's not press our luck. I'm going to be killed and I'm sure that there'll be punishment for you. We should not do this. So Arthur says, don't worry, everything's going to be fine. I'm the prince. I'll take care of you. We should go. So once again, they get on their horses and so on, and they go through the gate in the middle of the night, and they go through the village. They see the people that are sick, that because these people get food. When in the palace, when they're finished their food, there's a lot of food that's left over. They bring it out to the villagers and so on. So those sick people are waiting, for the food, and other villagers are waiting for that. That's why they're all hanging around the gates. So they go through the village and they see the village, and it looks nice and everything, but they get to the far end of the village and they come to these groves of trees and so on, and they see these people in the shadows. And Siddhartha gets down off of his horse and he goes looking at these people, and he sees these people who are all kind of hunched over, and they all, their black hair has turned white, because everybody had black hair in those days, and they might be walking with sticks or canes, and their skin is sagging, and they don't have good color, and they look pale and everything, and they kind of stammer, they don't talk very well and so on. And Siddhartha's never seen anything like this. So he says to his attendant, who are these people? He says, oh, these people are old people. These people who they're human beings like us, and we live for so many years, but then slowly our body begins to get old, it begins to decay, and it begins to break down and so on, and the hair turns white and the skin gets saggy, and we don't see so good, we can't talk so good, and we need help walking and so on. He says, well, Siddhartha says, well, this couldn't happen to me because I'm a royal prince. He says, oh no, he says, you're a human being just like the rest of us, and this will happen to you. He says, well, I've never seen this in the palace. He says, of course, the king won't allow this to happen. Anybody who starts showing signs of age like this, of old age, has to leave, and goes out into the village. Well, Siddhartha, once again, is completely amazed at this and blown away, and says, oh, I'm going back. Let's go back to the palace. I can't deal with this. So they turn around, go back into the palace. Nobody knows they're gone. And Siddhartha goes about being, a dutiful royal prince again. So now, during this next period of time that he's in the palace, his wife, Yasodhara, gets pregnant. And everybody's so thrilled. Everybody's so happy. There's going to be a royal birth. This is great to keep on the lineage and so on. This is wonderful. And Siddhartha, he's thinking about this and saying, my goodness, this is going to be a life changer for everybody. It's going to be a life changer for him as Siddhartha is the prince. And he's thinking about this, but he's also thinking about those people that he saw. He's thinking about the suffering of those people that are sick. He's thinking about the suffering of the old age people and so on. And he's thinking of himself. He's saying, my goodness, you mean my life is going to be finite like that, that I'm going to die, that I could get sick, that I could get injured. This is not good news. So he says to himself, he says, I got to go out again. And, but he waits until it's about time for his wife to have the baby, but she hasn't had the baby yet. And they go out, and they go out through the gate again on the horseback with all their beautiful clothes and so on. And they go out past the groves where the old people were, and they go out to the foothills of the mountains that are part of the Himalayan range, so it's the smaller mountains and the foothills and so on. And they get all the way out there and they see this procession. They're out there late at night, but the sun starts coming up and they see in the distance, they see this procession of people that are chanting, that are singing, that are in like a single file, that are making their way up this mountain, these foothills. And he notices that in the center of this procession is what appears to be a slab, what do you call it, a gurney or whatever, that they're carrying, and there's a body. There's what seems to be a body that's wrapped in white clothing that is being carried, that this body's laying on this stretcher. And he says to his attendant, "What's this?" He says, "Well, this is a funeral." He says, "A funeral? What's a funeral?" He says, "Well, you see that stretcher in the center there, and you see that white body there. That is a human being who has died. They died from the disease, they died from the injury, they died from old age, and now they're taking it up to the cremation ground where they're going to burn the body." Siddhartha says, "What? I've never seen anything like that." He says, "Of course not. You don't see that in the palace. The king won't allow that. But this is what happens to all human beings." Siddhartha says, "Well, this can't happen to me." He says, "Oh, yes, this can happen to you, just like you can get sick, just like you can get injured, just like you'll get old, and you will die. All beings die." Siddhartha was just totally amazed at this, and his mind was just boggled by this, and he's thinking about, his wife who's about to have a child and everything. And he says, "Wow, we've got to go back. I got to forget about this. I can't bear this anymore." So as they're swinging around from the Himalayas, they're coming out and they're coming along the ridge of a forest. You can't tell how big the forest is, but he can see the trees, very close together. And he sees there's people that are in between these trees that are like making music, and they appear to be naked. They appear to be dancing, and they appear to be, they're playing musical instruments, and they're chanting and singing. And he says, "Well, who are these people?" And the attendant says, "Well," he says, "these are the ascetics." He says, "Well, what's that?" He said, "Well, these are people who have renounced human life. They have renounced the world, and they have gone out into the forest to be with their teacher, to learn how to meditate and to be able to find enlightenment, to discover enlightenment for themselves." So Siddhartha says, "Well, that looks very enjoyable." He says, "That's something I would like to do." But his attendant says, "No, we have to go back. Remember the other things that are happening. You have to go back and everything. To do this, you have to give up everything. You have to give up all your clothing. You have to give up all your riches. You have to give up all your family. You have to give up everything to go do this and find the guru who is their teacher and take up with this group of people." So Siddhartha thinks, "Well, yes, you're right. We need to go back in. I'm not ready to do anything like that." So they go back, and they're not missed overnight, but they get back into the palace, and very shortly after that, Yasodhara gives birth to a baby boy, and his name is Rahula. And there's great jubilation. Everybody is thrilled that this baby is born, and then now there's a male successor, after Siddhartha. So they thrilled. The king is thrilled, and there's great jubilation and everything. So time goes on a little bit, and maybe just a month or 2, 3 months, something like that. And Siddhartha is thinking about this. He's thinking about the things that he's seen. He's thinking about the suffering that he's seen. And he's thinking about the dead people. And he's thinking about the joyous people who were the ascetics that were in the forest and everything. He's thinking, there's something about this. There's something that means something to me. I want to understand this more. I think I need to be able to go and join with the guru in the forest. And he thinks, and he goes and he looks at his wife and his baby that are sleeping in the middle of the night. And he says, if I don't do something about it, if I don't leave now, I'm never going to be able to leave. And my life is just going to be just living in the palace and just what I've experienced up to this point. And I'm not fulfilled with this. I need to understand more about what it is to be a human being. I need to understand the jubilation that those ascetics were having. I need to understand that. I need to understand more about what enlightenment is. So he convinces his attendant once again to take him out. And this time the attendant is falling on his knees. He's supplicating Siddhartha, please, tears are coming down his eyes. Please, if you go and you stay out in the woods, for sure the king is going to kill me. No question about it. He's not going to be happy with this at all. So he says, don't worry, I'll write a note. I'll let the king know that this was my doing and I made you do this. You won't suffer because of that I made you do this. So the attendant agrees and they get on their horses and they go out to the edge of the woods, the edge of the forest. And Siddhartha gets down off of his horse and he says, here, gives the horse to the attendant and says, here, you take this and you take this back to my father. He'll want this horse. And he gives him his clothes. He says, here, you can have these clothes. And here, you give these jewels to my wife, to Yashoda, and to the baby Rahula. You give them that. And here's the letter that I've written to my father to explain all this and everything. And so now Siddhartha's gotten down to nothing at all. That he's naked and everything. The only thing he has is his long hair. And he says, now it's time for me to cut my hair. And the attendant says, oh no, you can't do that. Once you do that, there's no turning back. And he takes his sword, takes his dagger, and whack, he whacks off that ponytail that they have, and he throws it on the ground and says, and he makes his way into the forest, and the attendant makes his way back to the temple, to the palace. So Siddhartha now wants to join up with the ascetics. So he goes into the forest, and he's not too far along when he hears some singing, chanting in the distance, and he makes his way to those people, and he sees those people, and he says, I'd like to join you. I'd like to understand what it is that you're doing and so on. And they said, oh, welcome, that'd be great. He says, the way it works is you go, we'll take you to our guru, and he's got, us as his disciples and so on. And he gives us all the teachings, and we listen to the teachings, and we do the practices. We do everything he tells us to do. And we go into the village and we take in our begging bowls, and we receive the food, and we bring the food back to the guru, and then the guru is satisfied. He has what he needs and so on. So he gives us the teachings. We see to it that he gets whatever is put into the bowls, and he distributes that among the disciples and so on. He says, okay, that sounds good. So they go back into further into the forest, and he meets the guru. The guru explains to him what the disciples had said, and he agrees to take on the teachings and the responsibilities that he would have to the guru. So this goes on. He stays there for quite some time. It's not expressed exactly how long it is, but it's quite some time. And but he's not getting any answers about this suffering. What's the cause of this suffering? Why are people getting sick? Why are people dying? Why are people getting injured? Why are people getting old and so on? Why does this happen? And so the guru says, well, I can't answer that for you. You have to meditate. And he says, well, this isn't satisfying me. I'm going to find another teacher, because he knows that in this forest, there's many other groups. So he goes and he leaves that group and he goes to another group. He finds another teacher, and this one is reported to be, a much more profound teacher, a better teacher. And this teacher, same arrangement with the begging bowl and the teachings and so on. And they agree that they're going to enter into this teaching reciprocation. And he's there for now a longer time, but he's not receiving the instruction that he wants. He's not learning about what the cause of this suffering is. Why do people suffer like this? What is this? What does this mean? How do we overcome this and so on? And the teacher says, well, I've taught you everything I know. I can't teach you anymore. He says, there's another teacher who's further deeper into the forest. Go to him. Maybe he can help you. So he takes off and he goes deeper into the woods and he finds this other teacher, and same arrangement and everything. And after some period of time, he reaches the same point where the teacher says, I've taught you everything I know. You're not satisfied. I don't know what more to tell you. So Siddhartha had made some friends along the way at this third group. And he says to these friends, he says, I'm not satisfied. I'm not getting the understanding. I'm not getting enlightened. I'm not getting the awareness of what it is, why there is suffering, why people suffer and so on. It says, but I need to know what it is. And I've learned how to meditate, and I've become a very good meditator. And I believe that the meditation is the key to this. And what we've been learning through all this is this power of renunciation. That what they've been doing is they've been eating very small amounts of food, and they've been, they're naked, they don't have any clothes, and they've been losing weight and so on, and they're getting a little bit weaker and so on, but they're getting closer to the awakening that these teachers are talking to them about through the renunciation of their everyday life. So he says, well, I can do this on my own. I don't need to be with them to do this. I want to go, let's go up into those foothills. Let's go up to those caves up there, and let's go up there, and I'm going to meditate. You guys, you do what you want. So he says, they say, okay, we agree with you. We would like to do that too. He says, okay, but everybody is by themselves. We're not going to do this as a group. So they agree, and they go up into these caves, and sometimes they're in the caves, sometimes they're underneath these great big trees, these huge trees, these fig trees that are very big around, I don't know, in circumference they might be, or in diameter, they might be 6 feet in diameter, something like that. And the leaves are very big and luscious leaves and so on. So they protect them from rain and the elements and so on like that. So many people take up doing meditation underneath the trees, where they go into the caves and so on. So they go up there for 6 years. For 6 years, Siddhartha is eating meager amounts of food and getting skinnier, getting thinner and thinner, losing his hair, getting weaker and weaker and weaker. And you might have seen pictures of what's called the starving Buddha. And he just becomes literally just a bag of bones. And you see that his rib cage is completely exposed. It's just skin and bone and his arms are so thin and everything, and his hair is all bedraggled and so on. And it gets to the point where after 6 years, he can't think straight, and he can hardly sit up to meditate. He can't think straight, and he can't meditate. And he says, this is not working. He says, this is not good. He says, I feel like I'm not getting any closer to enlightenment. I'm getting further away from it because I'm losing all my strength. And this is not right to me. I just have this awareness that this is wrong. So he decides that he's going to leave. So he's making his way down the mountain path, and his 5 friends see him and they come out and they say, Siddhartha, what are you doing? He says, I'm leaving. He says, we've been here for all this time and I'm not any closer to enlightenment. As a matter of fact, I feel like I'm getting further and further away from it. I feel like I need to go back down into the village. I need to do something else. This is not working. I don't know what it is, but this is not working. And they say, oh, Siddhartha, our prayers are being answered. Soon we will die. And when we die, we will attain enlightenment. He says, no, he says, I don't think that's true. He says, I want to attain enlightenment in this life, with my mind. I want to attain it now. He said, no, you got to stay with us. We're close to being renunciates. This is what being a renunciate is. We're renouncing this life. We'll die from this life. He says, well, you guys stay here if you want. I'm leaving. So they go back to their caves, whatever. He makes his way down and he's very weak. It's not even clear that he's walking. He might be crawling. He's so weak. And he comes down into this riverbed that, up in northern India, that they get the summer monsoons. So these great rivers swell up and they're rushing mad water, that's coming. And then as soon as the monsoons are over, the water dries up and the riverbeds just become these flat beds of small stones, river stones and so on. And he's making a way across this. And I've been there. I've been to this place. I've been to those caves. So I've seen what this is. And he's making his way across the riverbed. And this goat herder girl is in the distance, and they kind of meet at the edge of this riverbed where now it's like, some regular land. And she sees him and she offers him some goat's milk. She has the goat with her and she has some rice with her. She offers him something to eat because he's so weak and so on. And she knows about these yogis that are up in the hills because it's not, the villagers know about these people. It's not uncommon that they would do these things and so on. So the villagers are very aware of that. So she sees him and she offers him food and he takes the food and he's very grateful and he's feeling a little bit better and everything. And she leaves him and she goes back into the village. And he's still out there in this flat area there. And she tells the villagers what happened. Well, the villagers are just amazed and they are thrilled and they start getting their offerings together, their rice and their milk and other foods and everything, and they come out into this flat land where Siddhartha is, and they're all making these offerings to him. So around this whole area that's miles around, they've got these shrines that are built right into the among the trees and so on, where these people have come and have made offerings to Siddhartha. So they still go and they still make offerings to this day. This was such and such a family or whatever who made offerings to Siddhartha Gautama at this time and so on. So over some time now, he's eating and he's getting stronger. He's feeling better. He's thinking better. He's getting clearer. Excuse me. He's able to move about on his own and so on. And he's saying, wow, he says, I realize now that I need my body. I need my brain, that human beings need all these things. They need their physical body. They need their intellectual brain if they want to be able to meditate. you got to be strong. You got to understand. You got to be able to have contemplative powers and so on. So you need a good body to do that. So by renouncing this world, by renouncing this body, is not the right renouncement, is not the right cutting back. It is using the body in the proper way to be able to free one's mind. That is what we need to liberate. That is what we need to understand and so on. So he says, now it's time for me to resume my meditation again. So he goes out into this area, the same area that is that flat land where the riverbed is and so on. And he finds this great big tree, this fig tree, and he sits under it. He says, I'm going to sit under this tree, and I am going to not get up until I attain enlightenment. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to start tonight, and I'm going to stay here until I attain enlightenment. So he goes there and he gets himself comfortable. He makes a nice cushion for himself with the leaves and so on like that. And he's a good meditator. So it's easy for him to do. Now he's strong. He's able to resume his meditations, and he goes into a samadhi that he's very familiar with. And he's there during the middle of the night, and he's very peaceful. The samadhi is very peaceful, when all of a sudden this demon rises up in front of him. And this demon has great powers, huge. And this demon is very handsome. This demon is very smooth talking. And he says to Siddhartha, he says, what are you doing here? He says, you could be a great leader. You are a king. You need to resume your position in the royal family, and you will have all these people. You will have the kingdom will be yours, and you will be able to influence so many people. And your father and your family, your mother, your daughter, your wife and your son and the other parts of your family, they're all waiting for you. They all want you. You need to be with them. They need you. And you will have great powers to be able to convince people to follow you and to do things, and with their support, you will be great and the kingdom will be great. All you need to do is to get up now and follow me. Siddhartha looks at him and says, when I was young and I was in the palace and I saw what all the ministers and all the royal attendants and all the different people from the different kingdoms would come, and the manipulations that would go on between all these people, the politics that was being played and the lies that were being told and so on. He says, no, he says, I didn't enjoy that, and I wouldn't enjoy that now. I don't want that to be my life. No, you get behind me. I'm not following that. And just like that, the demon disappears, and Siddhartha's just feeling wonderful. So, oh, okay, that's great. I understand. So he says, now I'm going back into my meditation. So he goes back into his samadhi, and he goes into that samadhi. Now he's going deeper than he's ever been before in his samadhi. And he's peaceful and serene in that samadhi, when all of a sudden this demon rises up in front of him. And this demon is huge. And this demon is so powerful that fire is coming out of his eyes, and lightning is coming out of his fingers, and fire is coming out of his mouth, and power is just whirling around him. And he says, Siddhartha, why are you sitting here doing this? You're wasting your time. Don't you know that you are a great warrior? And you can lay waste to all the kingdoms all around you, to all the people, and you can have all those lands. You can have all those people can be your people, can be your land. You can be the greatest warrior that the world has ever known. All you need to do is get up now, stop what you're doing, and follow me. Siddhartha thinks to himself, he says, when I was a teenager and I was young in my 20s and I was learning the martial arts, and I remember the pain that I was causing my cousins and the pain that I was causing the attendants' children and so on. And I saw what was happening. And then I remember those people that were maimed and injured and everything. And the sorrow that was causing, the suffering that was causing. No, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm not interested in that. He says, no, I'm not going to follow you. You follow me. And bam, that demon disappears. And Siddhartha now is back in bliss, peacefulness of his meditation. And he goes back into samadhi, sitting underneath the tree. And now he goes deeper, deeper, deeper than he ever thought was possible in meditation, in samadhi. Very deep. And he's there, very comfort, when all of a sudden this demon arises that is 4 dancing girls, gorgeous, voluptuous, lovely beyond imagination, who say to him, Siddhartha, why are you sitting here like this, wasting your time? Don't you know that you could be with us? We will give you such pleasure. You can have pleasure that you never, ever thought was possible. All you have to do is just give up what you're doing now and just follow with us. Come with us, and we can go back to the palace. We can go anywhere you want, and you will have this wonderful pleasure. You will never want for anything. We will take care of everything that you need with this wonderful, blissful happiness. He says, when I was back at the palace, before I got married, and even after I got married, I had attendants all around me. They were taking care of me in ways that I never thought were possible. As a matter of fact, they taught me how to take care of my wife. He says, no, he says, I understand what that is, because they started fighting among themselves. They were jealous if I was with this attendant, not with that attendant. And all this jealousy and this envy, and it created a great deal of unhappiness in the palace from time to time. He says, no, I'm not interested in that. I don't need that kind of pleasure. And I've seen what happens to our bodies. You're beautiful now, but I've seen what happens as we get old, and your body changes and changes color, and the skin sags, and everything that's beautiful now becomes very ugly. No, he says, I'm not interested in that. You get behind me. You follow me. And just like that, the 4 dancing girls disappear. Siddhartha says, oh, okay. Now it's time to go deeper into my samadhi. So he goes back into his meditation, very, very deep, unimaginably deep. And finally, everything opens up to a point where he sees all the causes of all the suffering of all beings. He sees all the lifetimes of all beings. He sees all the lifetimes that he has experienced or that others have experienced. And he sees that all beings, whether they're human beings or whether they're animals or they're fish or insects, or he sees that there are subterranean beings that were invisible before. He sees beings that are on the earth that he never recognized before. He sees that there are beings that are above the earth that he didn't recognize before. He sees the causes of the emotions. He sees all the cosmos. He sees all of this and recognizes all of this, that he is part of all of this, and all of this is part of him. And he sees that this is what every being has, that all beings share this together. And he sees that he recognizes that time stands still. He sees that place is the same, that all beings are the same. Every place is the same. All time is the same. He sees all this. He recognizes all this. And he just is in complete bliss in recognizing all this. And he's trying to process this intellectually, but in his heart center, it is just completely fulfilled. It is just completely open, completely pure. And he recognizes this is the true nature. This is what he's been looking for. And he sees that all he has to be is just who he is. All this is natural. So the sun starts coming up by now. And this samadhi is not leaving him. This awareness is not leaving him. And he's thinking, this is the enlightenment. This is what I've been looking for. Now I see that there is a pathway to get here. This is magnificent. And this is wonderful. And I shall do everything I can to sustain this. And I will radiate this through everything that I do. So he gets up and he starts moving about, and he's pacing up and down this pathway, and he's trying to process what all this is. He says, well, how do I explain this? How do I explain this to myself? I have this sense of love. I understand this love, but there's so many other things that are racing around in my mind, in my head. How do I explain all this? What do I say about this? And he's trying to process this, and he's pacing up and down. And every step that he takes, flowers are popping up with every step. And I saw this, I was there. And it's still a place there, and you can see that. And his 5 friends now have come down out of their hermitages, and they've been befriended by the villagers, and they've been getting stronger themselves. And they see Siddhartha, and they see Siddhartha now has a golden glow of a body. And they can see that all his skin, all his features are so sublime and so handsome and so beautiful and so strong. And he's just radiating this golden light. And they say, oh, Siddhartha, what has happened to you? He says, I have seen enlightenment. They say, are you the Buddha? He says, I don't know what to call it, but if that's what you call it, I must be the Buddha. If you can see that, because, he couldn't see himself, only his arms and his legs, but you can recognize me as that. They say, oh, yes, you have changed. Teach us what it is. Teach us the enlightenment. Teach us how to be like this. So he said, I don't know what to say. So he continued pacing up and down, and they continued to eat and get stronger. And so for weeks, he's just moving about and trying to process what happened. And he thinks to himself, he says, the place I need to go is to Varanasi. Varanasi was east of where they were in Gaya. This was in Gaya in India. It's a city. It's a huge city now. Then it would have been much smaller, but it's still a famous city. And so he says, I should go to Varanasi because Varanasi is the holiest place in India, the holiest city in India. It's where all the Hindus want to go to die. And if they can't die there, they at least want their body to go there to be cremated on the Ganges, on the steps of the ghats. They're called the ghats of the on the shore of the river Ganges, which is the mother Ganges, the mother river. And if they can't be cremated there, they at least want their body to be put into the river, that they should be, consumed by the river itself. This is the holiest place in Hindu. So he says, this is where I should go. So he starts walking, and his 5 friends now are following. Oh, Buddha, Buddha. They're calling him Buddha now. Buddha, please, Buddha, teach us, teach us. He says, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know how to express this. You won't believe it if I try to tell you. He says, oh, tell us, tell us. He says, I don't know how to tell you. So he's going, and they're following him, and he goes into Varanasi. And when he gets into Varanasi, he just realizes there's nothing there for him. He's just it's just, you know, it's full of superstition. It's full of people following dogma and fearfulness and suffering. And he says, there's nothing for me here. And he continues walking straight through Varanasi and gets to the eastern side. He gets to like the eastern suburb of, excuse me, I said eastern, it's the western. He's walking western. So he's walking westward from Gaya to Varanasi, goes out through Varanasi to the western suburb of Sarnath, Sarnath. And Sarnath has this great meadows there, and it's called Deer Park. And there's deer there, and they're still there. And they have sal trees there, and it's very beautiful, very bucolic, very beautiful, very calm, and so on. And he finally gets there after 7 weeks from the time that he attained enlightenment, 49 days from the time he attained enlightenment, that he gets there. 5 friends are following him, and he goes underneath a tree, and he says, you 5, you sit here in this circle in front of me. And he says, I'm going to give you the first turning of the wheel. I'm going to teach you what it is, how it is I attained enlightenment. He says, I can't give you enlightenment. You have to find that yourself. But what I can do is I can teach you how I got there, what was going through my experience to be able to get there. So they then sat in front of him. So this teaching becomes the Dharma. This is the Dharma. The Dharma is the speech of the Buddha, the intellectualization of the true nature. The true nature is regarded as the mind of the Buddha, the big mind, the heart mind. This is the brain mind. This is the temporary mind. This is the mind of the intellect. This is the mind of human beings. This is the mind that goes beyond human beings. We have this mind. All beings have this. All sentient beings have this. Human beings can recognize this. This is the gift of being a human being. But to recognize this, we have to be able to purify the obscurations, the blockages that the little mind puts around our true nature so that we don't recognize it. So within this physical body, we have this intellectual body that is able to contemplate the meaning of all this and to recognize, to be able to recognize the spiritual body, the big mind. Does anybody need to take a short break, stand up, a drink of water or something? I'm going to take a drink myself. Is everybody ready? B and Tommy, are you back?
Taking a short bathroom break here.
Okay, I'll wait for you. B, are you ready yet?
Just returning here. One sec.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay. So now the Buddha now gives the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, the first articulation of his experience and how he attained enlightenment. So this is referred to as the four truths, the four noble truths. It's in the writings, it's called the four truths, but I think, it's been explained to me that for the sake of the Westerners, it's been called the four noble truths. So, but nevertheless, these four truths encapsulate this whole experience as human beings that we are trying to understand and to transcend. So, the first of the truths is that all life has suffering, the truth of suffering. It doesn't matter who we are. It doesn't matter whether we're a man or a woman. It doesn't matter whether we're rich or we're poor. It doesn't matter whether we're young or we're old. It doesn't matter whether we're a human being or another animal or an insect. All beings have suffering. And the suffering can be defined as that there's a birth, that there is illnesses or injury, that there is old age, and that there is death. So all beings go through that. We talk about this in other one-on-one programs. So right now I'm just giving a introduction to this. So this truth of suffering is to be understood. That we are to understand this as human beings. To become enlightened, we need to understand suffering. And we need to understand suffering as a result. So what is it a result of? It is a result of the cause of suffering, which is the second truth. The cause of suffering is desire. The desire that we have to be born, to have this life, this desire to have all these things that we deem to be who we are, the clothing we wear, the way we dress, the home that we live in, the possessions that we have, the families that we have, the friends that we have. All these things, all these are the results of attachments to our desires, fulfilling our desires. We can expand that to be able to say, not only is it desire, but it's also our aversions, our hatreds, because we become attached to those. We become attached to our delusions, our ignorance. We become attached to our jealousies, our envies, and we become attached to our greediness, to our pridefulness, to the things that we have that we don't want to share with other beings. So we can say that the suffering is the result of the causes of our emotions, our afflictive emotions, these emotions that cause us suffering. Now, we can say, well, we've got our families, we love our families, we want to help our families, and so on like that. Is that a cause for suffering? Well, it can be if we don't understand where our balance is. So this is part of what we need to recognize. We need to develop critical thinking about what it is to be a human being and how to balance our true mind and control our physical body and our intellectual body. To see that that's three bodies that we have, and that we need to be able to recognize how to be able to balance them to become a complete human being. So again, we talk a lot about this. So the attachment, the desire, and the other emotions need to be abandoned. They need to be abandoned. At some point, we just get to that point where we say, you know what, I just got to cut these things off because the thoughts won't stop coming. It's not going to stop that I got to think about my job. I got to think about my parents. I got to think about my children. I got to think about my possessions. These things won't come. I got to cut off these thoughts. And I do that by critical thinking, by saying some things just need to be able to be what they are and let them be that. And for me, not to make them more than what they are. When they become more than what they are, we're going out of balance. So we have to be able to have that critical thinking. So how do we do that abandonment? How do we do that? So the third noble truth is the truth of the cessation of suffering. That we have to abandon suffering. We have to stop suffering. We have to give up suffering. And suffering is this result, this cessation is the result of the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is the cause for the cessation. So the third truth is we have to have the cessation, the renunciation. We have to have the what needs to be actualized, what needs to be cut off, where we need to be able to create boundaries for ourselves in order that we may free ourselves. We have to create boundaries of our human body, speech, and mind so that we can be free to be able to experience our true nature that has no body, speech, and mind. So that may sound contradictory, but that's what we do. So this is what needs to be actualized, is the cessation. So we need to simplify our lives. So how do we do that? We do that as by way of the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is that which is to be relied upon. This is a system by which we can evaluate our lives on an everyday basis. And this Eightfold Path, we're going to go into more detail about this later, but I'm going to tell you what the 8 elements of this is. That we have right view. The right view is freedom. All beings want to be free. It doesn't matter whether we're a human being. It doesn't matter whether we're a domestic animal. It doesn't matter whether we're a wild animal. It doesn't matter whether we're a fish, or it doesn't matter whether we're an insect. All beings want to be free, and they will do whatever they can to maintain their freedom. The second is to have the right resolve. The right resolve is that we are going to do this, that we are going to put a plan in place, and that we are going to use this plan as a protection to keep us from being recontaminated. That we go through this process of freedom, but yet it may be unstable. So we have to have the resolve that when the temptations come, when the confusions come, and we lose track of what we're doing, that we have the resolve to re-engage on the path, to be able to maintain our protection, our resolve to attain freedom, liberation. The next one is to have the right speech. The right speech is to always speak the truth. We get caught up in so many lies, the rationalizations, the things, the delusions that we tell ourselves that we think are true, that to support our afflictive emotions, to support our mental misconceptions, that we create these false stories that make us a hero and everybody else is a bad guy. Or that we become the bad guy because lots of people have a poor sense of well-being and they believe that. And they think everybody else is good. That can twist. So if we always speak the truth, then we don't ensnare ourselves in this web of delusion and this web of lies. If we don't know something, the truth is to say, I don't know. And that for many beings, that's really hard to do. They don't want to admit that they don't know. So they weave some kind of a story to themselves and to others for their self-aggrandizement in one way or another. So the third one is to have right speech. The fourth one is to have right conduct, the right behavior, that no matter what we do, we're not going to harm other beings, and that we're always going to do good things, that we're going to learn and make judgment. We're going to learn how to evaluate what is virtue and what is non-virtue. And we are going to always practice virtue. We're always going to do good deeds. We're not going to harm other beings. And we're going to tame our mind, our behavior, to tame our mind. Our mind is part of our body. Our brain is what I mean to say. Our brain mind is got its own thing. Its job is to think. That's its natural job. You can't stop it from thinking if you try. Just like you can't stop your heart from beating, or you can't stop your lungs from breathing and your diaphragm from breathing in the air. You can't stop your bodily functions from working. You can't stop your brain from thinking. So to be able to recognize that as natural, but then we learn that we can tame our mind through our big mind, through our heart mind. Our heart mind is our spiritual mind. So learning what that is for us to become Buddha, that we are not affected by the three demons that were characterized in the Buddha's story. So we'll come back to that in a little bit. So to have perfect conduct, right conduct, right behavior. The next one is to have right livelihood. Right livelihood means that we live in society. We are societal beings and so on. And that at any given particular time of our lives, we interconnect with other beings. Sometimes we're the student, sometimes we're the teacher. Sometimes we're the trash man, sometimes we're the doctor. We all have these different jobs that we do at different times, and we're sharing these things with other beings. And we see that there is this connectivity that we have in society, and it's part of what it is to be a human being. So to have the right livelihood is to understand what our choices are and to make intelligent choices, to have that critical thinking, things that suit us. Sometimes we may start out doing something and realize, it's not quite right. I had a choice, I should do the other thing. So to have the courage to be able to say, oh, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to go and do that I wanted to do before. So we talk a lot about that. So to have the right livelihood, this interconnection in society, to be able to support ourselves and to help other people to support themselves and so on, not to be an impediment in our lives or an impediment to their lives, to find our happiness. The sixth thing then is right effort. That we're always moving forward. We're always trying to improve ourselves through our goodness and through our virtue. Always looking at where we are, evaluating ourselves, and putting forth the effort to be able to analyze and be truthful to ourselves and make choices that are based on the proper analysis and so on. And it's a process because we fail many times. Excuse me, and we have to accept our failures, have compassion for our failures, and recognize that what we are doing is building a body of wisdom. Because wisdom is not always knowing the right thing to do. Wisdom is knowing what happens when you do the wrong thing. And what's the best teacher of doing the wrong thing is when you do it yourself. And then you can remember it for yourself, and you can also communicate it to others. You can teach your children. You can be with your friends. You can help your friends and so on like that. So to have the right effort of moving in the direction of goodness, of virtue. Then the next thing is to have right mindfulness. Right mindfulness means that you take the time, you take the effort, you have the place to be able to circumspect what your life is, who you are, what you are doing. Think about what you're doing, develop your critical thinking, but then beyond that, to be able to go into contemplation of that which you may not be stable in, to contemplate all the different choices you have and so on, think them through, think about the failures that you've made, think about the successes that you made, and think about those of other people that you can learn from. Because we don't all have to make all the same failures and all the same successes in order to be a complete person. We can do that many different ways. But in addition to that critical thinking, in addition to the contemplation, is the meditation. The meditation is the transcendence of our intellect into our big mind, into our true mind, into our true nature, to transcend that human aspects of what it is to be a human being into being what it is to be a spiritual being. So that's right mindfulness, and being aware of where you are at any given time. Say, what's my mind right now? What am I thinking about? Where is my heart mind right now? Am I agitated? Have I blocked this up? Have I forgotten the principles of what it is to be free because my emotions have taken over and the delusions have taken over, and I'm not feeling happy, I'm not feeling satisfied, I'm not feeling love inside my heart? To be aware of that is all right mindfulness. And then finally, the eighth part of the Eightfold Path is the right concentration or the right absorption of this. In other words, that all these things now is like, we are like a vessel, we are like a vase, we are like a bottle. We are like this body that is holding all these things into a balance, into a stasis, into a functioning way in which this is organized and so on, and to have that and know that we are the architect of that, and that we are the engineer of that. We may have an architectural view of what we want this to be, but we find that through all the changes, all the things that happen in life, we have to always be tweaking it. We have to be engineering it and re-engineering it to meet the challenges of the causes and conditions that confront us in everyday life. So realize that all this is all coming together in the proper absorption, the proper concentration within our lives. So it's with this eightfold path that we are able to achieve the cessation. The cessation is the attachment to all those things that are causing the suffering. So we can be an ordinary human being. We can be a human being just like we are right now and be a Buddha. We can be a living Buddha. We're already Buddha. One of the things that the Buddha did say in his early teachings was that we all have Buddha nature. We are all Buddha. But the problem is we don't recognize it. And once we recognize it, then to be able to sustain that Buddha nature is what's difficult, to live an enlightened life. Our great philosopher, Ken Wilber, who is alive today, considered to be one of the preeminent philosopher of our generation, says we're already enlightened. We just don't recognize it. But what's really hard once we do recognize it is to live an enlightened life. So this Eightfold Path is there to help us to do that. So Buddhism, the Dharma, is a system, an intellectual system that navigates through the physicality of our body, navigates through the psychology of our brain, and navigates through the spirituality of our heart center, that leads us to becoming a complete human being, which can be Buddha, a living Buddha. So this was the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. And you can imagine that maybe you hearing this for the first time, you may think, wow, this is pretty revolutionary. I haven't heard some of these ideas. Maybe you've heard them all. But in either case, can you appreciate the simplicity of this, the purity of this, the fundamental simplicity of this is so wonderful, so magnificent, that it is a blueprint for us all to be able to be happy human beings, to be satisfied human beings. So the Buddha was a genius in being able to bring all this together. Many of us, we may have this Buddha nature, but we may not have the intellect that the Buddha had. The Buddha had this intellect that 2,600 years ago, he was able to bring this together. Those 7 weeks that he was walking, pacing up and down from the time he attained enlightenment to the time that he went to Sarnath and began teaching, he was putting this together. He was thinking about this, critical thinking, and saying, oh, here's how I can explain this, not only to other people, but to myself. I can understand, see how this has worked, see how this goes together. So it's a system. So there's many other systems. The Buddha system is not the only system. Christianity has a system. Judaism has a system. Hinduism has a system. Islam has a system. Taoism has a system. All these different systems are all speaking about it. Their very, very, very core, the very, very essence is all the same. That we all have this true nature. This true nature is pure, is natural, and it's all virtuous. And that we are all the same. There's no difference between us. And so we create those differences. So Buddhism is a very good system at being able to articulate this in both scripture. There's many, 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 many books that you can refer to. There's many, many, many teachers. And what they teach is the pathway to be able to understand this or to experience this for yourself. Because the Buddha said when his 5 friends said, oh, give us enlightenment, teach us enlightenment. He says, I can't give it to you. You have to find it yourself. Here's how I did it. You can follow my path and find it just as I did. You can try some other path. You can try and figure out your own path. So I need to wind up, but I'm going to say quickly that The Buddha was 35, 36 years old or so when he attained enlightenment, when he gave these teachings. And then for the next 50 years or so, he traveled around northern India, what is now northern India and Nepal, and gave teachings in all these villages and so on. And he encountered many, 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 many people and so on, and gave teachings that we call the Dharma teachings that are based on these four truths. And that many people have become liberated. And many people have found enlightenment, in other words. And many of his disciples have found enlightenment and so on. There are living Buddhas amongst us now. There are those that will come in the future. There are those that have been in the past. And so that we begin to recognize that and see that, take responsibility for who we are, whether we are Buddha or whether we're living as Buddha, or that we are keeping ourselves as a demon, as the demons who fought against the liberation of becoming Buddha. The Buddha died. His body, he ate some bad food when he was about 84 years old, depending on what book you read, what year he might have died, at what age. I just want to read to you something quickly because it's pertinent to this story. And that is, these are Buddha's last words. He had 500 disciples that were in front of him when he passed. And they were, lamenting, oh, don't go, please don't go, don't leave us, don't leave us. You're our leader. You tell us what to do. We need you, So this is what he said to them. He says, behold, all disciples, now I exhort you. All compounded, conditioned things have their nature of constant flux, and they are subject to change. Strive on ardently with mindfulness to complete your tasks. So he's telling them that everyone has to find their own way. He has shown a pathway. It's up to them to integrate that into their lives in different proportions, different ways, and so on. All the elements may be the same, but the way in which we do that is up to each of us, because, as I said, we all have been the architect of our lives, and we are the engineers of our life. So we need to be able to do that. So it further then, to paraphrase, it says, death is an opportunity to shed all that was bad for all that can be good. So that's from the Sutra of the Passing of the Buddha. So does anybody have any questions or comments that we can answer in a few minutes? I mean, we normally try and stop at 9 o'clock, but if anybody wants to go later, I'm happy to go later for a little bit. But this is a convenient place for us to stop our story right now. No questions, no comments? Okay. Well, then I got to ask a couple questions myself then. So Jason, we didn't get to talk when you came to the center the other day, but what'd you think of this? Can you turn your microphone on?
I thought it was interesting. I knew the story, but your recitation of it, added a little bit, to it. It's also been more than 20 years since I heard the story, so it was refreshing. Appreciate that.
Okay, good. Thank you. B and Tommy, what did you think?
The story always resonates with me, having grown up in the United States, and I've grown up in the suburbs, in a very wealthy area. I see a lot of connections in my life between the beginning of being sheltered from all of this sort of suffering, and then, you know, becoming aware of it, and what to do when you see other people suffering, when you yourself are suffering. That's what it makes me think about a lot.
Very good. Yes. B, how about you?
I always enjoy a refresher on the Eightfold Path. Was I think I'm constantly sort of reassessing my beliefs and my interactions with Buddhism, and it's sort of nice to always have something to come home to continue growing.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths is something that I feel that we learn early on in Buddhism, but sometimes, like you said, it's the simplest things that continue to resonate.
Yes, thank you. So the one of the parts of the story that has always been very important to me has been when he was meditating and the three demons that came up. So how do you think about the three demons? What do you think about the first demon, the one who had the great ability to be able to manipulate people and so on? What do you think of that? Well, then let me help a little bit then. This was the demon of ignorance. This was the demon of delusion. Thinking that he needed to be part of the society of his family, of the palace, of the kingdom, and so on. And they needed him. And this is the delusions that we tell ourselves, that we need to do these things, for the sake of other beings and so on. When, so we're creating an arrogance for ourselves. We're creating a false story for ourselves by doing that. And then that leads us to the next part, which is the attachment to the desire. And the desire, the four dancing girls, represented the desires of the body, the desires of having a human life and so on. So he overcame that by recognizing the not only just the temptations, but also the games that the desires slip into, the jealousies and the envy and so on like that. It slips into that, and then hatred comes out of that. And then the one who was the warrior with the lightning coming out of his fingertips and the fire out of his eyes and mouth and so on. This was the hatred. The anger. Have you ever been angry, where you kind of feel like, you had that kind of power, or maybe you saw somebody else enraged like that, and how out of control that was, and how powerful that was, and how one moment of rage like that can undo all the virtue that has been built up over years and years and years, or lifetimes of work, by one episode of rage in that way. So to look at those three demons in that way, and see that, if you've ever experienced that, and I'm sure in some way or another, everybody has experienced that. So I think that's always something that has always resonates with me. It's been very important with me. Okay. Well, then, thank you very much. We'll refer to this story many times as we continue on. And if anybody wants to meet us at Dharma Surya on the weekend, we'll be there Saturday and Sunday. And we're going to be actually doing the practice for Sakyamuni Buddha. He was called Sakyamuni Buddha. Shakyamuni, Sakya becomes the family name. The Sakya is the family name of his family. So Gautama kind of fell away and it became the Sakyas. And then and Muni means sage. So he became the Buddha or the sage of the Sakya family. That's how his name came. So Sakyamuni Buddha refers to the historical Buddha who lived 2,600 years ago, whose given name was Siddhartha Gautama. So you can put those pieces together so you can understand that. A large part of what we do in Buddhism 101 is to be able to give you a vocabulary, to give you a way of being able to categorize these stories and ideas and so on, and so that we can organize our intellect in order that we may be able to develop that critical thinking, contemplation, and meditation. So that's a large part of what we do. So we'll be doing that practice on Saturday, and Sunday we'll be continuing to read the sutras of the Buddha. So there's over 100 volumes, and they're being read in the shrine room in the Tibetan language, but we also have some English translations that we can read simultaneously while the Tibetan is being read, and they're great. And if you have time and want to do that, we'll be doing that pretty much all day Sunday, 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock. So you can check our website for more information. And if you need to be on our website, or rather get our emails, if you haven't signed up for that, please let us know, or go to our website and there's a spot there for you to sign up for it. Okay.
Thank you so much, Lance.
You're welcome. Thank you. We do our dedication for tonight. So we'll do the dedication prayer by, no, we'll do the short prayer, the Dekorma prayer on page 20 in our book. By the virtues collected in the 3 times, by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate word of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Trikampa Ratna Shri, who is omniscient, Lord of the Dharma, master of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank
See
you,
all.
Lance.
Hope to see you all next week. Okay.
Thank you, Lance.
All right.
Adios, amigos.
Thank you. Okay.